I'm Tony Northrup, and I'll use as much or as little bokeh as I want on any given day. I want to talk about the most important piece of gear in my kit, the Mavic 2 Zoom. I'll explain why I love it despite having some major flaws. First, let me announce the winner of my last drone giveaway, and then I'll tell you about my next drone giveaway. The winner of my Mavic Mini is Craig Nicholson in Perth, Australia. Here's the next one I'm giving away. This lightly used, barely crashed Parrot Anafi that I absolutely loved. It was my main drone for more than a year, up until the point when I got the Mavic 2 Zoom. So head to freesdp.com. Both this giveaway and this video are brought to you by KEH. If you want to upgrade your gear, sell your old stuff to KEH and then check out their inventory there to see if they have some great prices on used gear, because they probably do. KEH is the #1 buyer and seller of used gear in the world. You can easily get a bunch of money for the stuff that you're not using without any risk to you. Like, they'll size it up, give you an estimate, then you send it to them, they send you a check, and you're done. This is the Mavic 2 Zoom, a travel drone that is capable of just about anything. Now, if you watched my Mavic Mini review, and maybe you should, you'll see that I'm actually pretty nitpicky about how the drones work, and I put them through really extreme situations. The reason I didn't like the Mavic Mini was it kept blowing away when I was on the side of a mountain or near the ocean. A lot of people say they never have those problems, but I really put these drones to work. I take them into pretty intense environments and I expect them to perform 100%. There are two drones that I found that do that really well: the Phantom 4 Pro and the DJI Mavic 2 Zoom. The Phantom 4 Pro is great, but it's really, really clumsy to travel with. It does not fit in any kind of reasonably sized backpack, and that's what makes the Mavic 2 Zoom really amazing. It is really large for a travel drone, even folded up, but it fits in my backpack easier than my Parrot Anafi because it's actually shorter, despite the fact that it's fatter. One battery has almost always been enough for a full day's shooting. You should know a full day of shooting for me might be shorter than a full day of shooting for you. I use drones to get establishing shots and transitions and wide angle shots. And so when I fly, I know exactly the shot that I need. I put it in the air, and I'm usually in the air like 3 to 5 minutes, and then I come back down. So these batteries have been enough for me to fly at 3 different places usually, which is about the most I ever do. And then every night I plug it in and I charge it. But that brings me to the #1 problem that I have with this as a travel drone. One sec. This is the charger for that drone. I hate carrying a separate charger for anything. It's actually really pretty big and bulky. Why couldn't they make this USB charge? Flying the Mavic 2 Zoom has been fantastic. As I mentioned, it has never failed me. It always goes where I tell it to. That's not as easy as it sounds. A lot of drones blow away. They can't necessarily go upwind. They can't necessarily keep up with fast-moving vehicles for tracking shots that I like to get. The Mavic 2 Zoom has never failed me, up to about 45 miles an hour. The reception on the OcuSync system is fantastic, better than any drone I've ever had. It will at some point start to sketch out, but you're always like well out of view by the time that would happen, or you're behind a hill or something. Even flying in dense places like cities where there's tons of Wi-Fi and cellular networks, the signal has been rock solid. Maybe more important is that the signal degrades gracefully. First, it will kind of give me a warning, and it's got bars on the screen that will indicate that the signal is getting weaker and weaker, and then I lose the video feed from the front-facing camera, but I'm still able to control it. So it is able to receive signals even when I can't get the video back. And that's really important because I can use the GPS and the map to basically fly into instruments, turn it around, and bring it back to me until I get a signal. Other drones like the previous generation Mavic or the Parrot Anafi, those drones lose signals in those circumstances. And that weak signal is what made me give up the advantages of the Parrot Anafi for this more stable Mavic 2 Zoom. That Parrot Anafi has one big advantage over the Mavic 2 Zoom, and that's that the camera is never obstructed by the props. The Mavic 2 Zoom, if you face the camera forward, everything is fine in a hover, but when you start flying forward, the way it generates forward momentum is by tilting like this. And then when the camera tilts up, the view might be obstructed by these props that get into the shot. And the way the Mavic 2 handles that is it turns the camera down like that. It ruins my composition. And I've had this happen over and over and over again. Some people never have this happen, but some people don't ever fly in high winds. They're not around mountains. They don't travel with it. Those are things that I do. That's how I shoot. So it is a constant annoyance. The technique I use to get around that is generally to fly the same route backwards. And then if it's a still scene like a desert, I can usually reverse it and have it look okay. But the difference between pushing in and pulling out on a subject as far as motivated movement goes in filmmaking, that's a big difference. And those two shots are not interchangeable, and often it's simply left me frustrated. You might not have this problem. If you fly up high and you always point the camera down, it's not going to be an issue. But me, I fly low and I often track ground moving subjects. That's just part of my style. And the inability to point the camera straight or up while flying forward, especially into a headwind, is a non-stop annoyance. I hope if I keep bringing it up, DJI will eventually release a drone that doesn't have that problem. Maybe their forthcoming Mavic 360 will solve that for me. Because I often fly in fairly extreme conditions, I frequently need to do hand launches and hand landings. This is required in situations where we might be taking off from sand, or if there are like little kids or dogs around or other animals that might attack the drone, it's safer to actually launch from higher up. I wish this is something DJI would put more thought into. It works okay, but basically I have to hold the controller with my left hand and launch it like that while holding this out. And it's a little bit clumsy, and I've actually cut myself a couple of times. I'm literally bleeding here. So I don't recommend it, but at the same time, if you're taking off from a boat, that's really the only option that you might have. But you know what I wish they would do? I wish they would put buttons on either side of it, or just one button on the bottom that you could press to make it take off, like something physical that I could just push with my hand. Like pushing these two buttons would make it stop. DJI, in the next generation, please think more about safe hand launches and hand landings, because there are scenarios where that's the only thing you can do. My next minor gripe about the Mavic 2 Zoom is almost every time I go to take off, I have to recalibrate it. And that means that I'll be in a public place with usually other people waiting for me to get my shot, and I have to do this calibration dance where you spin around it and then you turn it sideways and you have to spin around it. It's ridiculous. My next minor annoyance is that it lacks what I consider to be useful obstacle avoidance. It does include forwards and backwards obstacle avoidance, but it's implemented in such kind of like a basic and dumb way. For example, if the drone sees something 5 feet in front of it, it will just completely stop flying forward. It doesn't say allow you to get 2 or 3 feet away from it. Sometimes I need to navigate through tight spaces, and I would actually really like the obstacle detection in those scenarios. What I have to do now is completely disable obstacle avoidance, and that means that a little gust comes along and gives a little shove and it's going to crash into something. The obstacle avoidance also fails to see things like power lines and tree branches, which are the top obstacles for drones. It will only see bigger things like walls. And I actually don't need help seeing walls. What I need help are seeing those little things that even with my eyes, I can't clearly see. They're invisible to the drone. The drone can also not see sideways in normal operating conditions. It advertises side obstacle avoidance, but that only works at very slow speeds, so it's essentially useless to me. If you're the type who just cruises forward, just looking around for fun, it's not going to be a problem, but one of the top moves is a sideways orbit. And I kind of need to keep my eyes on the screen to make sure that I keep the subject in the exact center of the screen, but the drone cannot see sideways. Even if I'm looking right at the drone, it can be difficult to precisely nail the depth perception, and I just need this guy to have some peripheral vision for those complex moves. This drone does 4K at 30 frames per second, but that's not what I typically use. I typically use 2.7K at 60 frames per second because, well, for one, I tend to shoot 1080 at 60 frames per second, so it blends better. 60 frames per second also gives me the opportunity to run it at 2 times slow motion, either stretching out B-roll and kind of smoothing any jerks, or giving me a little bit of a surreal experience for things like waves in the ocean. I know technically the video quality does not match the more expensive Mavic 2 Pro, and I'm totally fine with that. Nobody has ever complained. So if it's good enough for my nitpicky audience, it's good for just about anybody. This has a lot of fancy software-based features. I do not use any of them. Like, I don't use the pre-programmed movements. I would rather do all that myself because I get better results out of it and I know precisely what I want. The one software feature I use is subject tracking. When I'm tracking myself, I'll put myself in the camera, let it track me, and then go about my business. It's not great at that. It does some weird movements and often it's very uncinematic and jerky. But if I record myself walking around for 5 minutes, then I can get that, 5 to 10 seconds of footage I need to tell the story. But you're definitely going to get better results if you just learn how to fly the drone properly. For still photos, a lot of people will think that the Mavic 2 Pro is going to be the superior drone because it has that Hasselblad name, it has a bigger sensor, but this has a zoom on it. I don't often use the zoom, but the zoom is useful for reaching faraway subjects when maybe power lines or trees prevent you from getting closer. But for still photos, the zoom allows you to zoom in and stitch together a 48 megapixel panorama that produces sharper, cleaner images than you can get with the Mavic 2 Pro. For that reason, still photographers, people maybe doing real estate or even landscape photography from the air, this is the #1 drone I recommend if you have the budget. Honestly, every drone that's cheaper than this I've found to be too unreliable for me to want to use regardless of the price, because if the drone flies away or crashes into something, it's not worth anything to you, right? So this is what I would consider to be like the one drone almost everybody should buy. The other option, my second recommendation, is a little less expensive, and that's the Parrot Anafi. That's the one I'm giving away. You can get it at freesdp.com. Let me also thank our sponsor, KEH. Head to this link and you can sell your old gear and get a bunch of used gear at a good price. It's the cheapest way to upgrade your gear. I trust KEH, you can too. What you can't do is necessarily trust every buyer on eBay or Craigslist. It can get pretty scary out there, and KEH, buying or selling, is the easiest, quickest, and safest way to do it. If you have a Mavic 2 Zoom, write a comment and tell us what you love or hate about it. And that way people can read the comments and just get more widely varying opinions. If you want to find out who won that drone, if you want to see more reviews as well as tutorials for photography, video, and drones, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. Thanks a lot. Bye.